Okay, so this is our second video looking at the Smethwick CAN Connect 2 event that took place at St Hilda's Church on July the 3rd, looking specifically at the issues around creating places of welcome, and also a brief look at the Nightshelter project. Okay, so we started this session by just recapping on the 4 key areas that Smethwick CAN will be looking at. Firstly, response, looking at helping support people in crisis and emergency. Issues around support, which we looked at the first Connect event, around providing things like debt advice, money management and supporting people. We've also got our third event that will take place in the autumn around schools and family, and then the fourth area around employment and enterprise. Now what we currently have at the moment is obviously in the response sector. We have already formed Smethwick Food Bank, which is helping people of course in a crisis, in an emergency. Within the support sector, as well as appointing an information and advice worker, we have already run some money courses through the Christians Against Poverty money course. And then in the schools and family, this is probably the most established work that we have already. We have Amy, our schools worker, who's been employed for about a year, looking at issues around mentoring, that reading thing, a literacy program, running girls groups, and also recently launching the Prayer Spaces in Schools initiative. Okay, so this slide then has an outer ring that we've called Connect, and really this is where the Connect events fit in. Connect is about, first of all, obviously connecting with each other. We want to listen to one another, listen to each other's stories, listen to each other's expertise and the views and opinions that we have. We want to learn from each other, but as well as being a place to talk and learn and listen, we also obviously want to be a place of action. So from the listening and from the learning, we also want to form opportunities to act together. And as we do that, as we start to listen, as we start to learn and we start to act, then we might start to come up with various different ideas that might start to fill in some of those blanks. So for example, in support session, the Connect 1 session, we started to talk about setting up a community money advice debt centre, linking in more with the credit union and 6 towns. We could potentially provide more support around life skills. There may be things like visiting, befriending that might come into that. Around the response, there may be issues, and we're going to talk later about Nightshelter, helping people in a crisis who are homeless. But also around employment enterprise, we might add things like job clubs, Ignition, which is a course for 7 sessions that helps people get started in terms of the road back to employment. So really trying to fill in some of those gaps at the moment where we would start to act. And really it's about listening first, learning first, and then acting, and then starting to put some of these projects together. As well as acting, we also want to be able to feed back into the wider society around the things that we're seeing. So for example, when we start to see things in Food Bank, we start to see issues around benefit sanctions. When we start to see issues in housing around private landlords. When we start to see issues in schools around education or nurture. When we look at support and we start to see people in debt and we start to see people using payday loans, we need to also be able to have a voice and speak out to society. So we're going to be launching something called the Good Society Conversation in the autumn. The idea behind that is that we start to record some of the conversations that we're having in these projects, but also in the places that we're linked to, and that we feed that back to the decision makers and the politicians. And we'll be having an event also just before the next general election in May 2015. So Good Society Conversation is about making sure that we're not just listening to each other, we're also being able to speak out to those people around us and to the society around us. So the main issue we're talking about tonight then is, or we talked about during the Connect event on the 3rd of July, is the issue of place of welcome. So where does that fit within this diagram? Well, I've put it right at the heart of what we do, because I think the main thing is that we want to be a place where people can feel they can come to, that they feel part of a community, they feel accepted, they feel loved, they feel welcomed, and that really then at that place can they then start to receive the support. We've experienced at times various different things that might happen, like job clubs or housing surgeries or even debt advice and money management courses, where people don't come because they don't feel comfortable. But actually one thing we need to do is make sure that people feel that they're able to come to a place that is welcoming, that is loving, that is caring. And then if they need the support, they need the help in a crisis, they need maybe the opportunity to explore employment or enterprise, that they'll do that from that place of welcome. So we want to make places of welcome very much the heart of what we do, and really start to create a sort of network of different places that where this sort of support can be offered, but the first priority is to be a place of welcome. Okay, so Sarah and Jessica, who led this session from Thrive Together Birmingham, first asked the question, what makes people feel welcome? And we got a variety of responses, issues such as food and conversation, being well listened to, having a smiling face, um, someone who's caring where nothing is too much trouble. Things like accessibility and toilets and a nice environment were mentioned. Somebody to explain what is happening so people know what they're coming to. A place where there's opportunity to have response, so that people just didn't feel like they just have to sit there, but actually there's a responsiveness to the guest and the visitor that's coming. It was felt that regularity and consistency were important, and one of the key ones is people remembering who you are. So again, you're made to feel welcome, but also you're made to feel part of a community. So Sarah and Jessica then basically shared some of the principles behind the place of welcome, and they shared what's known as the 5 Ps. And the 5 Ps basically are, first of all, the place, a place that's open at the same time every week, that's accessible, that's hospitable, that people get used to the place being open at a certain time. The second P is people, that it's open to everybody regardless of circumstances or situation, and it's staffed by volunteers. It's a place of presence, a place where people are actively listening to each other. It's a place of provision, where there's at least a cup of tea and a biscuit available. There can be more, it could be a hot meal and other things. And there's also some basic information available as well. And again, that can be basic, but it can go right through to a signposting folder, right through to an advice centre. But the basics are a cup of tea and a biscuit and some basic information. And a really important principle is participation. It recognises that everybody who comes into a place of welcome is bringing their own talents, experiences and skills that they can also share with each other and share with those that come. So everyone who comes is a potential participant. Okay, so after the presentation we went into groups, and we had 3 groups, and they all fed back very different things, to be honest. And the first group had a lot of questions. I won't go through all the questions, but I'll go through some of the answers that we talked about. One of the key things was around the issue of targeted groups, maybe groups that focus on supporting the elderly or supporting parents and toddlers. And are they places of welcome? Well, technically, of course, they are places of welcome. They should be places that people feel welcomed and loved and accepted. But for the purposes of this network, the answer would be no, they're not places of welcome, because they're not open to all, they're not open to everybody. So those things can happen and people can be signposted to those things, but in principle, a place of welcome that we're talking about is something that's open to everybody. And we talked a little bit about what Smethwick CAN's role could be in all this. Smethwick CAN really can't set up places of welcome. That's up to the individual groups and churches and faith communities to do. But what we can do is we can promote places of welcome. We can help people get the place of welcome banner. We can help put some funding bids together. We can help provide some training. We can bring the network together, but that's what our role would be. And I think we're in quite a strong position to do that. We're in a strong position to get those people together, but we're not about setting it up ourselves. Question about place of welcome being a quality mark. Again, the answer to that was no, it's not a quality mark. It's a place where people can come together, networks can come together. So it's an informal place, not a place of sort of having a formal quality mark. They have to have certain checks. Obviously the 5 Ps are the principles that we need to follow, but we're not going to have a quality mark that we have to adhere to. There was also a question about prayer and faith and how that fits into the place of welcome. Well, again, what we said here is that we don't want the different groups and churches to lose their identity. If they're a place of prayer, if they've got space like within a place of worship, that they want to be able to take people to, and if people want to explore faith and prayer, that is absolutely no problem. In fact, it would be encouraged, but it's not something, again, that has to be done. But we don't want people to lose their identity just because they're a place of welcome. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to offer those things that are distinctive. If it's in a church, if it's in a library, there'll be things that are distinctive to those places that they can offer. So offer those things. Feel free to offer prayer, feel free to offer opportunities to talk about faith, feel free to offer reading groups. If you're in a library, doesn't really matter. Okay, the second group did something very different. They looked at existing places of welcome that they knew about, or places that could become places of welcome. So they really just mapped and plotted what was already going on. It was a really helpful exercise for us. So things like, they said there's a lunchtime drop-in at Bearwood Chapel, there's a coffee stop at Raglan Road, there's a community cafe being developed at Brushstrokes. Now they did ask one question at the end, is do we aim to get the logo recognised across Smethwick? Well, really, that's up to us. If all these groups here said, yes, we want to be a place of welcome, well, that place of welcome banner could be in all those places, and it would be very recognisable across Smethwick, and people would say, yes, I know that that place I go to on a Wednesday morning or a Tuesday afternoon or a Monday morning is a place of welcome. It's a place that's going to accept me. It's a place that's going to be welcoming. It's going to have basic refreshments, and that was fine. So yes, I think the answer to that is we do want to get the logo recognised, but it's really up to us as a network how far we want to take it. Okay, and the third group was just talking about where places of welcome could happen, and I suppose this is a really interesting one. Is it can't just happen in churches. It could happen with food bank. It could happen in lunch clubs. It could happen in libraries. It could take place alongside existing groups like Smethwick in a Stew. It could even take place in schools or with children's activities, but again, it's that principle of it being open to all and accessible to all. So even though it could take place in a school, that might have some difficulties because it's not targeted towards parents. It's targeted towards anybody that's passing by. So there might be some issues there, but it could basically take place, I suppose, anywhere. So some questions to ask then if you want to be part of the Place of Welcome movement would be, do you have an existing drop-in style activity and would you be interested in joining the Places of Welcome network? Do you have a community building and or volunteers that would be interested in setting up a Place of Welcome? And do you have a coordinator that might be willing to act as a point of contact with the wider network and be able to support volunteers? I think if your answer is yes to all three of those, then there'll be nothing stopping you joining the Place of Welcome movement. And what we've done is a questionnaire survey that you can fill in that has some of these questions as part of it. And if you answer yes to those questions, then there's an opportunity for us to come back to you and start to talk about setting up a formal place of welcome with the branding and with a banner, etc. And we can make that happen for you. Okay, then just very briefly at the end of the evening, we had the opportunity just to look at the Nightshelter project. Unfortunately, the video for the project didn't work, but we've given you the link to that video so you can have a chance to look at that at your own time. Okay, so night shelters are very much fit within the response part of what we do as Smethwick CAN, responding to emergency situations, to situations of crisis. And it was highlighted within the presentation 3 different potential groups of people that might come and use a night shelter in a church or in a community group. There might be people who are working, who can manage their lives reasonably well, but have lost their accommodation, perhaps following a relationship breakdown or other crisis. There might be people who don't like going into institutionalised hostels or other homelessness services and find it very difficult to go into those places. And it could also be for people that have got no entitlements to benefits, so maybe they're EU nationals or undocumented migrants with no recourse to public funds that have come from outside the EU. So they find themselves actually homeless because they've got no way of finding accommodation or finding funds. I think the key thing to remember here is that over cold weather periods, particularly those times in the winter, perhaps between January and March, this is when the provision is needed the most, and it's recognised that lives are saved each winter by churches providing night shelters. And the general perception is that church-run winter shelters are far more friendly and flexible than hostels, can be less bureaucratic, and they're a more direct response to the needs of homelessness and vulnerable people. Now, the model that we're considering as part of Smethwick CAN is this 7-church model, a model that proposed here that provides space, facilities and volunteers on one night per week each. So not one church is doing this for 7 nights of the week, it's 7 churches doing this for one night of the week. If other churches in the area would like to join the model, that's fine. Even if they don't have suitable premises, they can obviously provide volunteers that could join a team in one of the 7 churches. And the shelter could open, for example, between the 1st of January and March the 31st, and each church could provide 13 nights shelter in total over the 3 months. It could be less than that, it could be done over a 6-week period, it could be done over an 8-week period, a 10-week period, whatever we feel is appropriate. But let's say, for example, we were able to run for 13 weeks, provide 13 nights of shelter in total over the 3 months, rather than obviously 7 nights a week provision for 13 weeks of the year. Now, the churches engaged in Smethwick CAN could partner with other churches either in the West Bromwich Oldbury area, perhaps to form a sort of Sandwell night shelter, or potentially we could work alongside churches that have already engaged in the project in Birmingham. And we're having some conversations, particularly in the West Brom area, about whether or not there's a potential for us to do this together with them to really have a response to the problems of homelessness, particularly in West Brom and Smethwick, which is the two areas of Sandwell that have the highest incidences of homelessness. Okay, so at this stage all we're asking you to do is register an interest, and what we say is if you can provide volunteers for a local church-based night shelter, or you can provide a venue for the night shelter, then please do get in touch. If you can provide both, that's fantastic, but we want to hear from you for either one of those things as well, so volunteers or a venue. You can register your interest by contacting myself, and my details are there on the screen, or you can complete the questionnaire that's been sent out with an email. And again, if you've not received that questionnaire, that survey, then please get in touch with me at director@smethwickcan.org, or by calling my mobile number that's on the screen here, and I'll send you the link to the survey. You can complete that, and one of the questions on that survey is linked to the Night Shelter project. So just a very quick reminder then of the next steps that we've talked about already from the first connector video. If you've seen that, I can send an email with the links to videos of the projects that you can potentially get involved in. If you've not received that email already, then please request those links by emailing me at director@smethwickcan.org. The short online survey that's available can be sent to you as well. And don't forget that Smethwick CAN is here to offer training, it's here to offer support. We can also help with funding bids around those areas of interest that you recognise as some things that you'd like to be doing. And then when all the 4 Smethwick Connect events have taken place, we'll look to establish working groups in each of the 4 key areas. So there'll be a working group in particular based around response, so the night shelter will fit into that working group on response. And we're likely to do all that in January 2015. So thanks for listening. Stay in touch. The next Connect events will be in the autumn, in September and November, and we're also launching Smethwick CAN in October formally as a charity. So please stay in touch with us, and we'll keep you informed of all the things that are going on with Smethwick CAN. Thank you.